Medical professionals' consistent denial of the connection between stress and its effect on our health calls for immediate attention. Medical professionals need to forego their orthodox mindset that everything must fit into the scientifically explainable definition. There's more to people's health than can be defined by scientific terms. It's essential for them to know that there's a great connection between people's societal upbringing and the illnesses they suffer later in life. When stress is being discussed, many scientists view it as an isolated situation that's spontaneous enough to throw a patient off balance. They hardly consider its long-term effects and how historical background can be a significant influence. In the future of healthcare, the importance of childhood experience should be normalized, and doctors should be encouraged to learn more about their patients. As a physician, Gabor Maté uses his experience with patients to narrate how important it is for doctors to inquire about their patients' upbringing. Several patients have met an untimely death due to the ignorance and negligence of the doctors attending to them. There's nothing wrong with knowing about a patient's mental history because it gives a clearer insight into why they suffer from the illness plaguing them. Our body reacts to stress in ways that can be mild or devastatingly severe to our health. One of the most critical aspects of our lives in regards to our health is the environment we grew up in. The places we stayed in and the experiences we've had go a long way in determining our current health status. Mary was a workaholic who always felt obliged to help people out. She was a joyous and cheerful person, but she lost her life early to a very little wound. She had injured herself with a sewing needle, and despite many surgeries and pain relief drugs, she couldn't make it. Her problem was traced to Raynaud's phenomenon, a medical condition in which the small arteries supplying the fingers are narrowed, depriving the tissues of oxygen. Before she knew it, gangrene set in, and she required surgeries, but it was not enough. After her death, the author, who was also her doctor, realized he and other doctors had done things the wrong way. As she went from one surgery to another, none of the doctors bothered to check why she had a problem healing. They treated the illnesses as they came. Mary was a chronic smoker who also loved working all the time. As a kid, she had been abused and had to take care of her younger ones from the very young age of 7. Right from her childhood, she had neglected herself to look after other people, and this mindset stuck with her till her last days. The stress she was exposed to, and the fact that she didn't stop smoking early enough contributed to her death. The body is a reflection of what happens around us. A lot of doctors and physicians never see the need to understand where their patients are coming from. Some believe it's unethical to know such a thing. The claim is wrong and makes the treatment of illnesses in patients somewhat inadequate. We are influenced by what goes on in our society. Natalie was a married woman who also found it hard to say no to helping people. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a brain anomaly that impairs the functions of the nervous system cells. While she didn't require any major treatment, she suffered relapses because she was in an abusive relationship where she had to care for her husband, who had cancer, and a son who was into drugs and alcohol. When we stress ourselves too much, not knowing where to stop, our body reacts in different ways that might range from mild to severe. We need to understand how the body works to know when to stop and how to be productive without hurting ourselves. Understanding the delicate balance of relationships among our cognitive performances, our emotional environment, and physiology is essential to general well-being. The general medical approach to health and illness continues to assume that our bodies and minds are separable from each other. People's definition of stress further fuels this assumption. Medical practitioners usually see stress as some highly disturbing events that plague the human mind and cause us to worry. While this definition is true to some extent, it doesn't fully explain what stress truly is. Stress is not always visible on the face, and the victim can be oblivious of it. In the true sense, stress consists of the internal alterations that occur when the organism detects a threat to its existence or well-being. Though nervous tension may be a component of stress, one can be stressed without feeling tension. On the other hand, also, it is possible to feel tension without activating the physiological mechanisms of stress. For us to fully grasp the true meaning of stress, we need to understand the importance of emotional competence. Emotional competence demands of us the capacity to feel our emotions, so that we know when we are experiencing stress. Emotional competence gives us the ability to express our emotions effectively, thereby knowing how to use our present and past experiences to determine when our body needs to stop working temporarily. Knowing when to place our health above other people's needs is a crucial moment in our lives. It's important to know when to say no, regardless of the consequences involved. If we fail to respect our bodies will fail to work for us. Alexa was a teacher who had amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. This illness caused her to have problems holding something for long. Her shaky hands made it difficult for her to carry out her job, so life became complicated for her. When she was still a small girl, Alexa was abandoned by her parents, and she was taken care of by her stepmother. The stepmother didn't show her the care she needed, which greatly affected the young Alexa, who tried her best to impress her stepmother. She grew up believing that she had to take care of everybody so that they could like her. Alexa had good intentions, but like a lot of people, she didn't know when to stop and think about herself instead. "I promise you nothing is as chaotic as it seems. Nothing is worth diminishing your health. Nothing is worth poisoning yourself into stress, anxiety, and fear." Steve Maraboli. Our health is of paramount importance to us, and we must always endeavor to think about ourselves first before thinking about other people. We tend to dismiss the importance of stress, seeing it as a temporary state of mind that's expected of us when we are about to achieve a task. Our body knows when it's being strained beyond the limit, and like every other thing, it knows how to react. When you strain something beyond its limits, it reaches a breaking point where things go bad mildly or severely. What's worrying about stress, however, is not just its dismissal from the victims, but from medical professionals who should know better. Isolating psychological factors from mental illnesses can only give half-baked results. It doesn't tell the story from the patient's angle. For 7 years, Michelle had felt a lump in her breast that came and went, until it suddenly grew big overnight, and she became very uncomfortable. Fortunately for her, she knew what triggered her breast cancer and decided to take a break from work while she treated herself. Even though the pieces of evidence are glaring for medical professionals to see, a lot of doctors and physicians still find it difficult to ask patients about their personal lives. There's nothing wrong with knowing about a patient because getting information about where they are coming from gives you adequate knowledge on how to address their problems. It is also essential to know that some of our parents are at fault for some of the things we go through in life too. The form of stress associated with this comes from the desperate actions taken by parents or guardians that negatively impact the lives of their kids. Whatever action we take goes a long way in affecting other people, especially those who are close to us. When Betty Kravchuk had Barbara Ellen, she was going through a tumultuous marriage that she felt emotionally isolated from. In the course of finding her own feet, she was unknowingly creating a huge psychological effect on her daughter Barbara. As the sixth of 7 kids, Barbara was cut off from her older siblings, and from a very young age, she had feared being alone. She resented her mother for causing her emotional pain, and she found it challenging to stay away from a relationship for long. When she was about to lose her life to terminal breast cancer, Barbara became very hostile to her mother because she felt that her life was a reflection of her mother's actions. The decisions we make as parents can be very impactful on the lives of our kids. Parents must make conscious efforts to make decisions that would be in the best interests of their kids now or in the future. Emotional repression occurs when we subdue our emotions and keep pushing it back into our minds. There's a general belief that smoking causes lung cancer. As true as this assertion may be, it's mostly inaccurate. Saying smoking causes lung cancer is the same as saying water drowns people. You cannot drown unless you stay too long in the water, the same way you cannot get lung cancer from smoking unless you are a chronic smoker. While it's true that smoking contributes a lot to lung cancer, there are other determining factors, and stress is one of them. According to research by David Kisson, a British chest surgeon, people with lung cancer have poor and restricted outlets for the expression of emotion compared with non-malignancy lung patients and normal controls. In simpler terms, most of the patients who have been diagnosed with lung cancer have had difficulties in expressing their emotions. A lot of emotionally repressed people end up committing to smoking as a way of gaining respite from the burden of the emotions suppressed in their minds. This causes an addiction to smoking, which in turn triggers lung cancer and the rest. The key to breaking people's addiction to smoking is by understanding why they smoke in the first place. The connection between hormone levels and emotions is so important to the knowledge of cancer that it's surprising that medical practitioners don't pay much attention to it. For example, prostate cancer doesn't have any treatment that guarantees full recovery. The best treatments for prostate cancer require extreme measures such as orchidectomy or total removal of the male genitals. However, research has shown that prostate cancer is not caused by testosterone aggression as people have been made to believe. It is mainly triggered by the increase in hormonal levels, which is influenced by stress or bottled-up traumatic experiences. Traumatic experiences have a way of playing on the intelligence of its victim. It forces them to believe that they are at fault for whatever went wrong. Coping mechanisms developed at a young age go a long way in determining what we expect from the people around us. In 1946, researchers at Johns Hopkins University enrolled 1,130 white males over 18 years and questioned their coping mechanisms regarding how they were brought up by their parents. This research was carried out to know how people coped with their overbearing or nonchalant parents while they were young. It was also carried out to establish whether there were psychobiological characteristics in young people that could help predict their susceptibility to future diseases. Years later, the research was revisited. It was discovered that the majority of the people diagnosed with cancer or any other mental illness were those who suffered traumatic experiences when they were young. These sets of people were distant from their parents, and many of them had to pretend just so that they could look like good children. A lot of us develop coping mechanisms from a young age to protect our parents' image of us. Parents can be overbearing in enforcing their values on their kids, so we bottle up our emotions to please them. The coping mechanisms we develop from a tender age can influence us when we are older. A lot of people are used to pleasing other people at their own expense, borrowing from their childhood experiences. It is not ideal for any parent to be overbearing in enforcing cultural and moral values on children. While it's essential to teach our children the best things to do, we must also give them the chance to learn and express themselves. The obsessive need to please people to avoid backlash is also a significant determinant in how we have conditioned ourselves to accept blame. Often, we go for the easiest way out as long as it means we'll avoid confrontation. Avoiding confrontation is good, but it becomes addictive if we get used to it. It also makes us blind to manipulative tactics employed by other people who blame everyone but themselves. 39-year-old Martha realized how emotionally underdeveloped she had been when she was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. The disease, caused by the inflammation of the rectum, carries painful symptoms such as anemia, fever, bleeding from the gut, etc. She had been married to a manipulative husband who blamed her for everything, and the thought of being with such a man triggered a relapse in her treatment anytime she was ready to go back home. Her obsession with pleasing her husband almost took her life, but she was quick to realize what needed to be done to stay alive. Paying attention to our past experiences gives us an insight into why we relapse from health treatments. A functional disorder is a medical term employed by medical practitioners in describing a situation where they feel everything the patient is complaining about is all in their head. This means that in a lot of cases, the patient is suffering from a mental relapse and not a functional disorder as the doctors would claim. This is particularly common among patients who have suffered one trauma or another. In many cases, the doctors dismiss these patients without paying attention to what is actually bothering them enough to cause a relapse. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain where emotional memories are stored and linked with pain. People who suffer from irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, or even those who have recovered from it, can suffer a relapse due to this connection. The sharp pain caused by the IBS is triggered by the recollection of some of the emotional memories that involve pain. Recovering from trauma is not easy, it may take years. Doctors must make conscious attempts to understand where a patient is coming from before dismissing their complaints. One of the most common and prevalent mental illnesses is Alzheimer's disease. It is associated with dementia, which is a loss of memory. Dementia occurs in 3% of people who are 70 years old, and it increases to about 13% for people who are 80 and above. The relationship between dementia and stress can be linked to the hippocampus. The hippocampus is located in the temporal lobe of the brain, and it is associated with memory formation. Clinical examination has proven that the hippocampus shrinks when the body and brain are stressed internally or externally. Our body, which is mostly protected by the immune system, instinctively says no when we stress it too much. Just like the immune system itself, the presence of a virus or infection triggers a defensive reaction to protect the body. However, in an attempt to fight the invaders, the immune system goes berserk, tearing everything down. This is evident in our brains when we are stressed. It informs the body to protest, and in a lot of cases, these protests end up badly for us. The fear of abandonment and loss makes us vulnerable to needless anxiety. Unlike adults, children have no capacity for biological self-regulation. Adults can find a way to program their biologic environment to suit their current needs. For example, if the weather becomes too hot, we can switch on the air conditioner, and if it gets too cold, we switch on the heater. Infants are not afforded these opportunities, so they cling to the next available adult that they are emotionally attached to. Emotional and social relationships are very important to our upbringing and the way we view life. The psychological connection children attach to their parents is based on how the parents connect with them in return. However, it's essential to know that lack of self-regulation can spill into adulthood and affect us mentally. Adaptation cannot occur wholly within the individual because humans are a product of the connections established with family and tribe. Social and emotional connections are an integral part of our neurological and chemical makeup. We all know this from the daily experience of dramatic physiological shifts in our bodies as we interact with others. When we are scared of losing someone, we tend to explain ourselves too much, just so the other person can understand our viewpoint. Instead of taking a stand over our decisions, we spend too much time trying to persuade the other party that we're doing the right thing. However, when this becomes a daily occurrence, it leads to stress, which can lead to frustration or depression. The psychological connection between parents and their children is an endless cycle that has been passed on from generation to generation. While we may end up blaming our parents for affecting us with their choices, it's also important to note that they probably suffered the same fate as us with their own parents. This shows that people unintentionally pass on what they've learned from their parents to their own kids. Stress can be transmitted transgenerationally, and that's why doctors need to be familiar with a patient's historical background. When we fully grasp this, we understand why we should absolve ourselves of blame and live a life of fulfillment. The choice to become a better parent rests solely on your shoulders as an individual. Being a better parent involves knowing when you are wrong and being conscious of the decisions you make. Did you know? Approximately 8 million deaths each year are attributable to mental illness. We must dismantle the social beliefs programmed in us and install the determination to be better in its stead. Despite the number of years spent in researching the dynamics of our genes, people still fail to understand that genes alone do not form our full growth in life. As is evident with a plant, the environment in which a seed is planted determines how well the plant will grow. This example is the same with humans. We grow according to the environment we find ourselves in. Settling for the view that illnesses, mental or physical, are primarily genetic allows us to avoid disturbing questions about the nature of the society in which we live. We are often programmed with unconscious beliefs that control our lives. We believe things like, "I'm not lovable, I have to be strong, it's not right for me to be angry, I'm responsible for the whole world, I can handle anything, I don't exist unless I do something," etc. Negative thinking imposes on our freedom and liberation. It makes us vulnerable to the societal beliefs listed above. Liberation from oppressive and stressful external circumstances is essential, but that is only possible if we first liberate ourselves from the conditioned societal beliefs imposed on us. Understanding our body is very important, and that's why we must learn the 7 A's of healing, as explained by the author. Acceptance. We must accept how things are to know where we stand and what to change. Awareness. We must be aware of the fact that our bodies and mind are connected. Anger. Repression of anger is not ideal for the body. We must let out our anger in a controlled manner. Autonomy. We must develop an internal care center and take control of our lives by eliminating the traumatic experiences of our childhood. Attachment. Attachment involves our connection with the world and how it's crucial to establish good and sustainable relationships with people. Assertion. We must stand our ground and make a confirmation of who we are. We must assert ourselves and establish our control over our lives. Affirmation. Affirmation deals with making a positive statement towards having a fulfilling life. We must take positive steps towards the things that are valuable to our lives. When it comes to healing, We must look beyond the easy places and look deep within ourselves to find the answers to the questions that have a great bearing on our lives. Conclusion. Our minds and bodies are connected in a way that makes it impossible to isolate them when it comes to health issues. Mental stress triggers a lot of psychological illnesses, and what's more worrying is that enough attention is not paid to it. People fall into relapse because the physician attending to them has failed to establish the connection between their life and what they are suffering from. As individuals, we need to know when to say no and put our own health first before that of any other person. The things we do for people should have a limit, and once it starts telling on our health, we need to stop no matter how hard it may be. The body has its own way of reacting to both internal and external stress, which is why we must be careful. As seen in this summary, failure to take care of ourselves can have devastating effects that can spill over onto our children and loved ones. In an attempt to help people, we must never forget ourselves because only a healthy body can do many things. Try this. Make a comprehensive list of your daily tasks and check if you have enough time to rest and recuperate. If not, adjust your schedule to include more of yourself and less of others.